My name is Average Joe, and I'm a proud geek with expertise in movies, superheroes, and animation.
My name is Beef Pork Ribs. I'm a fine repository of esoteric knowledge, which I suppose most people would qualify as geeky. Though I dabble in many fandoms, my main areas of expertise are anime, movies, and Belgian comics, with a strong recent insurgency of D&D.
Our mission is to bring nerd and geek culture to the masses
by sticking it all under the microscope.
Welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast. Hello there, and welcome to the final Bat Jar Podcast episode of 2020.
Hey, woo, we've been so great. We love you, people who listen. But actually, we do love you, people who are listening.
And we will continue to put nerd and geek culture under the microscope.
And this time, instead of having a red Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer reference, the microscope is quite clouded because every time you flip it upside down, there's little white flecks that get in front of it.
I was going to say, are we sponsored by Microsoft? Do we have like a Microsoft microscope now?
Not as far as I know. I mean, man, that could have been an option at some point when my dad worked for Microsoft, but I think those days are behind us, and I don't think it will quite work.
There we go. There's the indistinguishable giggle of Mjolnir. Welcome back to the show.
Hi. I never know if I'm supposed to wait to be introduced or not. But I guess I just find Beef Pork Ribs hilarious and giggle beforehand anyway.
I don't think we have a hard set rule about how when people start. Some people just jump right in without an introduction, and we make it up on the fly. So Mjolnir, what kind of nerdy or geeky things have you done since you were last here?
Shoot, man, I don't know. What have we been doing lately? Not a lot.
Watching more One Piece.
Yeah, I mean didn't we? We finally finished The Boys.
That's true.
So that was good. Before Cribs and I we always have 5 or 6 TV shows going at the same time, and we kind of cycle through them and just binge a bunch of episodes at once of whatever it is. And we had a bunch going, but then Before Cribs was like, well, come on, let's watch The Boys. I heard it was good, and season 2 came out, and there's only 2 seasons, so we'll get through it really fast. Which I guess we did eventually. We got through it a lot faster than we'll get through Supernatural, that's for sure.
We're also halfway through season 2 of The Mandalorian.
Yes.
Okay, yes, because the final episode came out yesterday or on Friday, and yeah. I have seen it, so I won't say anything about it.
We're behind,
but we can.
Well,
this week
it's the way she goes. I also enjoy having many shows on the go. I have one housemate who just loves committing to one show and just watching it nonstop, and I'm like, I need more variety. I want to see different things, and it gives me the illusion that I still have cable because I'm watching different shows.
I think it depends for me. There are some shows that I will be able to focus on and binge or rewatch, like Scrubs, How I Met Your Mother, Avatar. I can power through 2-3 seasons of it at a time and just be like, yeah, this is good. I like this. And especially Scrubs, I tend to watch it at least once a year almost. It's a really, I don't know why I like that show so much, but I do.
Yeah, I just find I'm in the mood for different things a lot, and so I like always having a sitcom going, because sometimes you're I just need to turn off my brain and enjoy half an hour of silly fun where everything is resolved, in 20 minutes. That's always really nice. And most of the shows we have going right now are not that. We have Supernatural and Game of Thrones, and we had The Boys, and One Piece is kind of, it's super it's super wholesome, but it's also very fighty and angsty sometimes. It's kind of a mix. What else are we watching right now?
I mean, we've been on hiatus for a while, but JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is still in the mix. Yeah, technically.
It got too fighty for me. I gotta get back in the mood for that one.
And I think, and The Mandalorian, and we still have yet to watch the last episode of The Good Place.
Yeah, And I've been watching DuckTales by myself. I have like 2 episodes left, and I heard they canceled it, and I'm so mad because like the DuckTales reboot was so good, and I was really enjoying it. And
I've heard really good things. Like I've seen a handful of episodes.
yeah, and Disney like canceled it. There's no more seasons coming, I guess, and it made me very sad. So now I kind of feel like I have to save those last couple episodes because there's no more afterwards.
See, literally just before we recorded this, I finished watching Dragon Ball Super because I slowly like delayed my finishing it because I knew that it had ended, and I was kind of waiting for them to like announce more episodes before finishing it. But it's been it's been more than 2 years since it finished airing in Japan, and it's been over a year since like the English version's been done. So I'm like, all right, well, might as well just get her done. So it's always hard because
To be fair, Dragon Ball Z was never good at endings. Like Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z kind of just end on things are gonna happen, but we don't get to see them.
and I knew how Dragon Ball Super ended. That was the other thing too. Like I've seen the Broly movie, which takes place after Dragon Ball Super. So I'm like, okay, well, regardless of how this conflict plays out, I know what comes after it. So, but I've also finished Star Wars Rebels in the last month, which has been very helpful for watching this season of The Mandalorian. And I also finished Young Justice season 3. I picked up the Blu-ray of it while I was in Florida earlier this year before COVID. And yeah, I finally finished the last episode last week. So I'm excited for season 4, which I think is now going to have to go to HBO Max in the US. And I don't know how I'll end up watching it, but I'll find a way because Young Justice is my favorite show, or one of my favorite shows. People who have listened to this podcast for a long time know that. But I digress. Let's just talk about the biggest thing that's happened in nerd and geek culture news since we've last talked about the news. Wonder Woman 1984, we've already talked about how it's going to get a simultaneous theatrical and streaming release in the United States. It's been now confirmed that it will be available for digital rental in Canada. So in addition, if it's safe or you're able to go to a movie theater in Canada, come Christmas Day, you can go watch Wonder Woman 1984. But if you'd rather watch it from home, you can pay $30 and like rent it from, I think it's available like on YouTube and Google and all those different platforms. So, I think where I'm going to be over Christmas, the movie theater will be open and it will be showing Wonder Woman. But based on the conversations I've had with my family, it sounds like they'd be more comfortable if we rent it. So I'm willing to spend the $30 to watch Wonder Woman online. How about you guys? Would you pay that kind of money for that experience?
I mean, I don't know. I don't feel that strongly about Wonder Woman or the last Wonder Woman movie, but also there's a theater right near us. It's like one bus away. It's like 15 minutes to get there, and 15 minutes walking and 15 minutes bus ride. But like we've been talking about going there for like a couple of months. Just weren't really sure if there was something that we'd want to watch, but that
That was
might,
worth watching.
yeah, that might be it, and it would end up being cheaper than renting it, which,
Yeah.
eh.
My previous experience with movie theaters was usually like I was poor, but I was like I would go and see whatever the new Avengers movie was, and sometimes just I'd take any superhero movie. So like I think I saw Justice League in theaters and Aquaman because my friend dragged me along to it. But yeah, so like yeah, I don't know. Like superhero movies always feel better in the theater. I like watching them in theaters. They're one of the few genres that like is actually, there's a markedly different feeling watching it on a big screen booming at you, than like a comedy is like exactly the same in the theater or at home, right? But your big like superhero epics, they tend to work better in theaters. I don't know. So it's kind of, I mean, it's good they're giving people options, but I feel like most people aren't going to take the theater option. Are they are they releasing it to like what is it like the HBO streaming service or something? I thought I'd heard something like that too, that like there was an option, or did they like change their minds about that? Because I thought Warner Brothers had like was putting all their new movies on their streaming service to try to like drum up business for their streaming service.
you were predicting my thoughts because that's actually how we're going to talk about that as well. But to answer your question, yes, it will air on HBO Max at no cost the same day it opens in theaters in the United States. But since HBO Max only exists in the United States, every other market in the world is forced to either make people go to the theaters or not let people legally watch the movie at all.
Oh,
But
yeah.
now Canada and some other markets are giving people the option to digitally rent the movie.
I feel like the problem. I mean, I don't know if it's a problem necessarily, but it feels like they're just gonna get a bunch of people. Like, I don't know, a 1 month subscription is still cheaper than paying the $30 to rent it on something else.
They're hoping people will subscribe and then forget. Like that's what all those streaming services are hoping for. They're like, we'll get you in with a new thing, and then you'll forget you're subscribed to it, and we'll have you for like 3 years or whatever.
Yeah, and as Mjolnir mentioned, after they'd announced that Wonder Woman was going to get the kind of dual release of theatrical and streaming same day, Warner Brothers then came out and said that every movie that they're going to release in theaters in 2021 is going to get a simultaneous release on HBO Max.
And I heard that was super controversial, and like some of the like they hadn't talked to the filmmakers or actors in the other movies about that. Like Wonder Woman knew that was happening, and none of the other like properties did, and some of the filmmakers and actors and stuff were pissed about that because they had made their thing for the theater, not to be on a streaming service.
Yeah, and so I actually want to talk about that with you guys because in my mind, it's like this is the way to go forward for movies. If you want movies to make money, you have to acknowledge that it's going to be some time before movie theaters can have the same amount of people in them as we used to have. And I'm tired of people just delaying movie releases for the sake of trying to make more money. At least this way, we're actually going to get to see some of these movies, and it's a real good incentive for people to pay for HBO Max.
I mean, it's true, and I will say that like I'm a little bit annoyed that Dune has got pushed back again to October now, I think, which it was the only movie I was kind of actually excited to watch, although cautiously excited. Yeah, but I think it's a weird thing because I see the point of view of like actors and especially directors who had like this vision of making it for the theater, but I don't know. I feel like somebody needs to look into this, but like I feel like something that probably would do decently well for quarantine is people buying new bigger TVs or like projector or things like that because they're like, well, we're stuck inside anyway. We're just gonna have to watch movies and streaming services. Why not get a slightly better TV or a slightly better sound system? It makes sense to me.
I don't think it's inherently a problem for sure. I mean, I watch everything on streaming. Even as like a kid, my family very like we had cable on and off every once in a while whenever the cable company offered us like 6 months of free cable to try and get us hooked. And we didn't have it otherwise. And like I come from a big family, so like going to the theater was like a once or twice a year thing because 8 movie tickets expensive. We went for Star Wars and stuff. That's pretty much it. So like yeah, I'm used to watching stuff at home more. All my stuff's on streaming or DVD anyway. Um, so and it's nice to not have that delay where like nothing gets, something comes out of the theater and then like 3 months later you get it on streaming, and you have to go to the theater if you want to avoid spoilers and stuff. But I just think it's really crappy of them to not talk to the people who made these like properties first and like talk to the writers and directors and whatever about it, because there are, like I said with like superhero movies and stuff, there are certain genres that are made like that work better in like a movie going experience. And people, I know, I think like Christopher Nolan had some strong words on this, and I mean like he's like super pretentious and stuff and all about film versus movies and stuff, which like I agree with some of that stuff to a certain extent, but also like just let people do their thing. Like it's fine. But yeah, I don't know. I just think they should have talked to people more, and I heard there might be some backlash from that, and maybe some of the stuff they were planning on putting up won't be, or they like there was something like it was even like they're not paying people any different, or like they don't have, like, it was something like that too. That's not just like rights, but it's like money wise. It's like, well, if someone thought this was going to theaters and they were supposed to get a chunk of the box office or whatever, right? What do you do then? It's like that was supposed to be part of their cut, part of how they're being paid for their work. And
Yeah, like Christopher Nolan he's all about like the theater industry, and so he sees this decision as like the leading to the death of the movie theater industry. And of course, the movie theater chains themselves are very upset about this because you're basically like cannibalizing their potential for revenue. And as you pointed out, I think it's Legendary Pictures is a production company that co-produced the new Dune, and they also are doing the Kong versus Godzilla. And I think they're they get a portion of the box office, and naturally this approach will probably lead to a lower amount of box office because people will watch it at home instead. So their contracts are probably not written to like include, and I'm sure that would seem like the most agreeable thing for Warner Brothers to do is like amend the contract so they get a profit of the streaming rights as well. Otherwise, they're gonna like have just a PR nightmare.
yeah, they're gonna have to do something. Like I think it's a good idea. They didn't handle it super well, but to be fair, this is like an unprecedented situation. So if they were scrambling trying to figure out how to make money, and clearly just postponing stuff isn't working anymore, and things are going to get stale, then I guess they just kind of rushed into something and now they have to go back and fix it and tweak it and post type of thing.
The only issue is that like if they like, I can see going as far as like the online rental with other services, but it's really hard to figure out how much of the revenue on your streaming service comes from these movies, especially if somebody does keep it and watches like 3 or 4 movies. It's like, well, who gets the money for it? So I think
Mm-hmm.
that one is probably too complicated, but they might go into it. But I think definitely like the online rentals should have some kind of a clause in them.
And I mean, there's some stuff like streaming services in general. There's some kinks in the system they haven't worked out yet. Like there's stuff like, Netflix is famous for canceling series like two seasons in, because after 2 seasons, a series isn't bringing new viewers into Netflix anymore. Like anyone who was going to watch The Umbrella Academy would have watched it season 1, or maybe been like, oh yeah, there's season 2. I meant to check that out. I'll check it out. But no one's like buying Netflix to watch season 3 of Umbrella Academy, right? They already got everyone who would have been interested in that thing. So a lot of the time they just cancel series, which sucks for a lot of people and is super like disgruntling. So like there's issues with streaming services anyway. But also I feel like they should make their streaming service global if they're going to do this, because otherwise they're going to have a lot of piracy and it's going to be real bad.
I mean, I want to give them kudos too because frankly, they are leading the way in terms of trying to make content more available for people. Like no other studio is really being brave enough to take action on any of this. Like Disney just keeps, like I said, delaying everything farther and farther into the future, or just creating more content just for their streaming service. Like Warner Brothers were the ones who tried to do a release with Tenet in the theaters, and obviously like it didn't work. But they're kind of leading the way again, and it makes me excited because if other movies that are put out by Warner Brothers follow the Wonder Woman model of allowing us Canadians to digitally rent it, it means that I'll get to see the DC movies like the Suicide Squad and the Batman eventually, as opposed to like Black Widow, which at this point is supposed to come out next May, and if things don't improve, it'll just get delayed again.
Which like Black when Black Widow was announced, it was already like too late. People were like, "We know what happens to her. We wanted this movie 5 years ago." So it seems like a very strange decision of them to be like, "Yeah, we're just going to keep pushing this back. This movie that was already dated before it even came out."
Yeah. So anyway, looking like 2021, like the pandemic is not over, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens in terms of conversing about new movies. I'm looking forward to seeing movies again, and we'll see how this strategy works out for Warner Brothers. Hopefully, they'll kind of work out the kinks to make people happy. Obviously, with this decision, yeah, there's people who are going to be upset about it, particularly those who are movie theater owners, because it means that less revenue for them. But It's not like they're making a lot of money right now anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, and movie theaters will continue to exist in some form, even if they're not as mainstream as they used to be. It's like record players. Like, people still buy records because there are people who still like that sound better and this and that, or are hipsters. But like, there's a lot of different reasons that people still buy records. It's not like the norm, but it still exists, and a lot of people do still use them.
And I feel like it might also just be like it will go back to you know movie theaters who show classic movies or older movies are going to come back because a lot of these are impossible to find on streaming services. Like a lot of classic movies, which they may or may not still own the reels or be able to have access to it, but like if that could become its idea, and it is again a similar thing to like record store that are starting a resurgence people because people are like, yeah, this is cool, this is an event. And I think that the same way as like drive-in theaters never completely disappeared, I don't think movie theaters will completely disappear either.
They just have to adapt with the times.
Anyway, let's start talking about good things, because it is, as of the time of our recording and the time of this release, days away from Christmas. And we have been spending the last couple of weeks talking about Christmassy stuff. It's been very interesting, kind of transitioning from something that it was like The Nightmare Before Christmas to Home Alone to the Hallmark Christmas movies. And here we are talking about the movie Klaus. This is going to be like our big finale for Christmas stuff this year. This is a film that was released just last year in 2019 on Netflix, of all things. And I watched it on a plane on my phone coming back from Rome, Italy. I had been there for a work trip, and I had, for whatever reason, wanted to like take advantage of the fact that the Netflix on my phone allowed me to download movies. And I remember seeing this. I'm like, oh, like seems I like I saw the poster, a little image card there. It seemed interesting, so I downloaded it. And I watched it for the first time there. And even though I was on an airplane, I had a very emotional experience watching it. So, did you guys watch it last year when it came out?
Is this is our official SOS part?
Yes, that's right. We are in the Secret Origin segment.
I for myself, I'm pretty sure I saw it before you.
Yeah.
Because
you showed it to me after.
Yeah, so I was aware of it, and there was this kind of like I believe, I can't remember exactly, but somebody on YouTube had reviewed it and said it was really worth and it was like a spoiler-free review and said it was worth the watch, and that it was like, I think they said something like it's the best thing that Netflix has ever done independently. And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's a big tell." But and so but I didn't watch it myself immediately. But it was the school I was working at were showing a Christmas movie for Christmas to the students, and I recommended that we watch Klaus because I heard good things about it, and the other things they were suggesting were mediocre at best. And so
the classics that you don't respect very much.
no, it was like other things that are available on Netflix. So not a lot of classics at that point. And so we watched Klaus. I watched Klaus in French the first time that I watched it. It was interesting. It was still a great movie. And it was still hilarious and also full of feels. And then the second time I watched it was with you guys, so you can tell of that experience.
Yeah, I don't know. Before groups came home and was like, I watched this cute Christmas movie at school. We should watch it. And I was like, sure. So we did. Did we watch it with my roommates, I think? Yeah. And it was super wholesome and cute, and I really, really liked it. And we watched it again this year, so it's already, I mean, starting to move in tradition.
Yeah, so Klaus, as I've learned recently, it was actually produced in Spain by a guy named Sergio Pablos. He's the writer and director of the movie, and he like founded his own animation studio to produce Klaus. It's like their first feature film,
Oh, really?
and Netflix distributed it. So like they got funding from Netflix to make the movie happen, and it got distributed through Netflix.
It's a very unique style of animation, so I'm not surprised it was like a a new studio, because that's one of the things I really liked about it. It's absolutely gorgeous and very unique, and I love all the fun shade, like the strong shading, and I love like strong contour and stuff like that. So I think it's a really fun, exaggerated style.
So yeah, I'd never heard of Sergio Pablos before I looked him up yesterday, but I'm very familiar with his work because he used to work for Disney, and his first job for Disney, he's from Spain and he actually worked in France for Walt Disney Animation France. So his first job for Disney was as a character designer on a Goofy movie, which people who've listened to the show know I love a Goofy movie. It's like one of my favorites. So he's already got my appreciation there. He went on to be an animator for several Disney films. And if you guys don't know, the way that Disney during the Renaissance animated their movies is they had like animation teams for each character. So there'd be like a different person involved in the animation of each individual character. So the way, even like the way the credits would show up in the Disney movies is it would like highlight like who the voice was and then who the animators were for that character. Because in a sense, because those animators were animating those specific characters, they were contributing to the performance. So this guy was an animator on Frollo for The Hunchback of Notre Dame. He was an animator for Hades and Hercules.
I'm
He was
sensing
an
a pattern here.
well, it changes a bit because he was an animator for Tantor the elephant in Tarzan and Dr. Poplar from Treasure Planet, which I've never seen, so I don't even know who Dr. Poplar is.
Is that the cat? No, it's the dog.
Probably. Oh, the dog who looks like a goat. I thought it was a goat for the first time I watched it, and then I watched it again, and I was like, oh wait, because the joke is it's a cat and a dog who hate each other. That makes more sense than a cat and a goat.
Yeah. The doctor is I'm pretty sure is the dog. Yeah. Average Joe, you really should get on that. It is a very good movie. Though to be fair, I only watched it for the first time like 3 or 4 years ago, so I can't throw too much shade, but I recommend it. You should watch it.
I haven't seen Treasure Planet in years. I think I saw it like once or twice as a kid. It was pretty good. And then all I hear about it is that it's underrated.
This guy also wrote the first draft of Despicable Me. So he wrote the first draft of the story and then was involved with like selling it to Universal, and he's like credited as one of the creators of the Despicable Me franchise. So all this to say, like, you know, this Sergio guy, like he's had some successes in his career working for other studios, and coming over to Klaus, it's like his first time kind of like leading the charge and doing it himself, which I'm like, kudos to you, man, working up the ranks. Like those are some great characters that you've worked on. Some of them are villains and some of them are just kind of side characters, but you know, I think this is a great success story to say, like, you know, if you put in your hard work and doing the, you know, the menial work of like character design, eventually you will continue and find greater success.
Yeah, bleh. That's a really nice, like, yeah, not quite rags to riches story, but you know, like, yeah, it's a nice success story to
Career progression.
Yeah, and because you hear so much about all the crap animators go through, and it's a really tough industry, and like not kind to the people who work in it, and like the people who work in it, you know, just if they stay, it's because they have passion and talent, and they really love doing this thing. So it's really great that he, yeah, worked his way up and was able to, and got the practice so that, like, obviously when he finally got to do his own thing, and it is such a freeing, it's so freeing after you've been a cog in the machine to be like the person in charge of the machine for the first time. And if you've been a cog in the machine long enough, you learn from other people's mistakes and from other people's successes. And that definitely is what he did here, because there's like, it's not a perfect movie, but this movie is pretty darn solid.
And first movie out the gate nominated for an Academy Award, so, you know.
Yeah, super impressive. You can also,
Yeah, we're gonna talk.
sorry. I just want to say, you can also, I feel like you can see some similarities in the character designs, and again the exaggerated features and stuff in some of the characters he's worked on, and the look of Klaus. I think you can see how there's definitely a certain style he likes and stuff, and that he built on.
So we're actually going to go spoiler free, and then we're going to have a spoiler verse section for this episode, because I feel like this is the kind of movie that you benefit from not knowing all the details as you enter into it. So We are going to talk about the movie without spoilers first, or then we'll enter the spoiler verse. There'll be time codes in the description of the episode that will allow you to skip around the spoilers if you haven't seen the movie yet. And beef pork ribs, let's get going here. This probably hasn't been released on Blu-ray yet, but give us the Blu-ray case description for Klaus.
In a town this naughty,
Ow! Loser!
Home sweet home.
one unlikely teen
You make toys. I'll deliver them for free.
will give everyone a reason to be nice.
Think of all the joy. Rig,
Let's go!
The postman and toy maker are brainwashing everyone!
No time to lose!
ha! Eat our snow, you... They're not attached. Come on.
Klaus, rated PG.
A rich, spoiled man-child on a mission to force kids to write letters. To force people to write letters. Must team up with a strange hermit to get the kids to write all the letters.
There we go.
Magic ensues.
So
I'm trying
let's
to
talk
keep a lot of spoilers out of it, but, spoiled brat who is sent to an impossible outpost to get people to write letters, teams up with an old man to convince children to write letters, and magic ensues.
I think that sells it well. Let's talk about the animation, because Mjolnir, you already kind of touched on it, that it has a unique style. I actually thought it was like a computer animation that was meant to look traditional, but looking into the movie more, it is actually a style of 2D animation. It just has like a certain kind of shading and color to it that it kind of looks like a storybook almost, but it's not quite that stylized.
Really? I definitely thought it was CGI. Like, that they just made more, they just made it look a little more artsy than usual. Added, like, bolder lines. That's super impressive.
Actually makes sense, though, because I hadn't consciously thought about it, but now you bring it up. There is a certain amount of, like, fluidity in the character models that is less common for CG animation. You know what I mean? And it also made some of the, like, without spoiling necessarily, there is some aging that happens on some characters at some point, and it is easier to do that in a kind of 2D animation than trying to re-render an entire model. So that makes sense.
Just draw a few more lines in certain places, and you're like, yeah, that added 10 years.
Yeah, apparently Sergio was really inspired by some of the Disney movies of the 90s that kind of incorporated CG into traditional animation. And I think he was trying to like evoke that a bit with like the style that they created for this film, and it certainly helps it stand out and like makes it unique.
Well, he worked on Tarzan, which had a bunch. Like I just remember watching like the documentary at the end of the VHS on the making of Tarzan, and like there was like whenever Tarzan was like sliding down the trees, that was like CG tracking with 2D animation on top of it, and that kind of thing. Which so he worked on Tarzan, so he would know those kind of techniques and how they can add in certain things, like used sparingly but used properly, it can add a lot of detail, which I think this movie has a lot of very nice touches to it that are I don't know, that they add a lot to the atmosphere, and because it is a very atmospheric movie, right? Like especially as the atmosphere is slowly shifting, and the lighting, like the change in lighting evokes a change that's happening in the town and in the movie, which I think I always thought was really great.
Now, hearing that this guy kind of rose up the ranks at Disney and started his own thing, does this feel like a Disney movie?
I think it's a better way to look at it. It is someone who used to work for Disney but left. And so I feel it is much more evocative of a time where Disney took more risks in a way. Like, I don't know, like it's not
less formulaic than Disney is.
Well, there are some formulaic aspects to it, and we'll get that when we go into the spoilerverse, but like the idea behind it didn't seem to be a rehashing of something. It was more of a reimagining. And I feel like for as much as I rag on some of the movies like The Hunchback of Notre Dame for being a terrible adaptation of the source material, it is a, like, if you look at it as a reimagination so that it can be a magical, whimsical story for children, then it's not that bad. And I think that's something similar to Klaus, is that it's not like a retelling of something specific, but it's a reimagining to make it work and to make it kind of more magical in a way. And in that sense, it captures some of the like old style Disney magic, but it doesn't really feel like something Disney would do right now.
It's got that feel where it takes, you know, the Disney thing of like, you know, the Little Mermaid or whatever, where it takes something you know and a story that is well known, but yeah, but does it in a different way. Which, yeah, and I feel like maybe Disney used to be better at that, at like taking the basic idea and taking like these couple of traditions around a story, you know, and these few details, but then just adding all this other stuff to the world that wasn't part of the original story, and then adds to it and makes it kind of its own thing that really stood out. And it
Yeah.
does that very well, for sure.
I think if I were to compare it to something, I would compare it to The Sword and the Stone. Like, everybody knows Arthurian lore and legends, and everybody knows how it's supposed to go, but this was a retelling and a reimagining that made it more special and made it kind of, I think, more relatable in a lot of way. Like, Arthur is a lot more relatable in that movie than King Arthur generally is. And you add a little bit more whimsy and a little bit of magic in it, but you're still building on something that everybody knows, and every time there's a nod to the original, people are like, I see what you did there. And I think that
Yeah,
that's definitely something this movie has.
And
but
people, oh, sorry.
oh no, I was gonna tie it back to Tim Burton actually. Like if you think of like even The Nightmare Before Christmas, which we just talked about a few weeks ago, Tim Burton was somebody who started as an animator at Disney, so I'm sure there's things he's learned from his time working there about how to do a good story and how to do good characters. And then without, on his own, he was able to do things that were not necessarily part of the brand of Disney and create something new.
And I think that's not uncommon, generally speaking. Like, uh, there is something similar that kind of happens in the Japanese industry, where you get a lot of these people who like start working for the big studios and make these they work on these projects that were really successful, and then kind of go independent and start making kind of individual projects. And very often in the West as much as in the East, that is how new animation studios come up, is people who work for something well established and then decided, well, we kind of want to do our own thing, and then they do. And I mean, to be fair, there's a very you can draw a parallel between that and also like the video game industry, where often you'll get people who have worked for big companies and they're like, okay, but we want to do our own thing and make it crazy. And that's where a lot of nice indie games come out, is like, not always, sometimes it's just completely independent, but often there's the people who like have worked on other projects that then take it into their own hand, take a risk, and create something really nice.
This is I don't know if you guys have seen all the original like Rankin Bass stop motion animation Christmas specials they've done, but there's one called Santa Claus is Coming to Town. And in my eyes, this film Klaus is like an updated version of that. So people are probably listening being like, okay, like I heard this is about a postman and a recluse. Like, what does that have to do with Christmas? Well, this is not really giving away too much, but this film, Klaus, is in the same way that Santa Claus is Coming to Town was an attempt to try and explain a lot of the lore of Santa Claus. Klaus is another version of that story. And I don't know if you guys have seen that original special, but there is a postman in that. Mickey Rooney is the voice of Santa Claus. There's like this small town in like some undescribed European town where everyone's sad. I think it's even called Somber Town. Does that ring a bell?
I haven't seen that one. I've seen some of the other, like the stop motion ones, right? The old,
Yeah.
yeah. I've seen like one or two of them, mostly the Rudolph ones, I think. I haven't seen that one, but I have seen that like cartoon they made. I don't remember what it was called, but it was like, it was also a retelling of Santa Claus and trying to explain things, and he was like raised by fairies, and then the fairies helped him start Christmas. It was very strange. His like stepmom was a pixie or whatever. It was handled a lot worse than Klaus was.
I don't know about the one you were talking about because I haven't seen it, but did Christmas predate Santa Claus in it?
Yes, yeah, like in a weird way, I would say Santa Claus is Coming to Town is like a B type Christmas movie because even though like Kris Kringle is the main character, Christmas really only comes into the play at like the end of the thing when he's like decides and kind of like Klaus does. They're delivering gifts all the time, and he's like, okay, like I can't. This isn't sustainable. I can't just constantly be giving out gifts. And so in that story, they decide on Christmas Eve as the night to deliver gifts because it's like the day that he and his wife got married.
Okay, yeah, I think
Sorry, that just sounds really like Christianity erasing to be like, oh yeah, it wasn't there's no particular reason that day is special.
Well, the narrator does kind of like he does explain like, oh, like the night of miracles, the birth of our Lord Jesus. Like they do actually like reference.
Okay.
They do reference Jesus in it once.
okay. Well, whereas Klaus doesn't, but at the same time, Klaus talks about Christmas as being something that's already important. So it kind of
Silent Night plays at one point, so they don't you don't hear the lyric where they mention Jesus.
That's true.
Yeah,
They do.
they don't straight up be like, yeah, let's do it on that night that Jesus is born. But like they are like he is like, oh yeah, like let's do it for Christmas because Christmas is special and yeah. So it at least establishes that Christmas was a thing before Santa, which I like appreciated. I also for a second was like, I had a brain fart where I was like, wait, but how is there Christmas if he's not Santa Claus yet? And then I was like, wait, no. You were raised Catholic. You should remember. It was a very funny moment of like forgetting. But like, and I don't have a problem with people appreciating Christmas for the kind of that idea of, a time of togetherness and family and stuff, like kind of outside of the really specifically Jesus related stuff. I don't have an issue with that, but like it is a part of it. So like I appreciate when people at least acknowledge, even if they're focusing on some of the other parts of Christmas, I appreciate when they acknowledge that, the nativity and all that is a part of this celebration as well.
Okay, so like the very abbreviated version of Santa Claus Come to Town, a postman is talking to a group of children asking all these questions like, why does Santa do this or why does he do that and all this? And so he narrates the whole story, explaining like Santa was left as a baby on the front doorstep of a family that are basically like the elves, and he's raised making toys. And he comes across this small town where they're like kind of ruled by like this guy. He's like called Burgermeister, Meisterburger, and he's totally like a tyrant and doesn't want anyone having fun. So he starts delivering toys, but then the toys are confiscated and destroyed. So then as he's continuing to deliver toys, he starts hiding them like in the stockings, hanging by the fire and other things. And it all kind of like builds from there. So a lot of the gimmicks of like Santa going down a chimney or Santa leaving gifts in the stockings or whatever is a result of different things that happen in the story. So Klaus does its own kind of version of that, trying to explain different elements of the Santa lore.
I do actually appreciate a lot about this movie is that it isn't like mansplaining the things. It isn't saying like, well, this is why that like a lot of it is done without talking and some of it very visually.
It's very subtle and show don't tell for a lot of it, and it's very natural. Like it flows very well. It makes sense the way like the decisions that are made and stuff that add to this lore that eventually becomes this huge thing.
And like
They work really well.
I feel especially like I don't think this is a spoiler, but like when he talks about like Santa knowing everything and also the coal, that whole thing, it just came into a very natural conversation of this guy being annoyed at a kid and like talking to him and trying to scare him straight, basically, which was accompanied by probably the best music cue in that entire movie.
That bit did not feel like Disney.
No, that definitely did not feel like Disney. But basically, he's talking about the Santa Claus or Klaus being able to tell like when children are good and bad, and then he's like, And he's telling this kid who's about to throw a snowball at him, is like, so you want us to throw that snowball? And then the kid drops the snowball. He like turns around, it's like, thug postman kind of rap music playing as he walks off, and it is great.
So Klaus is a B-type Christmas movie because even though Santa, or who becomes Santa Claus, is a major character in this, I would say the majority, like, this is a perfect example of a B-type Christmas movie wherein the plot mostly is about other things, and then Christmas comes into it at some point and becomes important at a point in the story.
But like the plot is about Christmas coming into existence. So I don't know if I would I don't know if it quite fits into that category personally.
But A-type movie is like Christmas is an integral part of everything, which it technically isn't. Like, I understand what you're saying, but I do
what
think
would be the point of them showing like, oh, this is why this guy went down a chimney or whatever, or if it wasn't for Christmas, like a lot of the choices they make would not really make sense, or you'd be like, why are you focusing on that
in
without
universe,
Christmas?
but in universe, most of it isn't directly Christmas.
Yeah, how I kind of like rationalize what's an A or a B is like, if you can change the script and change some minor details and it still makes sense, then it's a B type.
Okay, but like you couldn't like just be like, yeah, we'll change a few minor details and this is about Easter now. Like,
Well,
you'd have to overhaul the whole thing.
yeah, but the whole story, so like, and that's the other thing too, like the main character of this film is not Santa Claus. The main character is this guy named Jesper, who's a postman. Most of the story is about him and his experience, and like Santa or Klaus comes into the story, but you could easily have this whole story about Klaus and Jesper doing all this stuff, and you could easily like maybe like have it end on a cliffhanger where it's like, oh, like let's have this, like, think about making this about Christmas later on. Like, in my mind, like the plot of the film is not totally, you're right, it's setting up things that are part of Christmas lore, but it's like the plot of the film itself is not rooted around Christmas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's fair. It's a weird movie, so it kind of defies placement, but I understand your reasoning there, that why it would lean more on that side.
Also, did you also think that Jesper was being voiced by David Spade when you first listened to it?
Because we both were convinced until we Googled it and found out he wasn't.
He definitely sounded familiar. I definitely did get Emperor Kuzco vibes from Jesper.
Definitely.
Yeah, because
okay.
David Spade is Emperor Kuzco, and he has a very distinctive voice and a very know-it-all, nasally. Yeah, and like also that's not a character voice. Like that's just his voice. You see David Spade in anything, that's what he sounds like.
Yeah.
He sounds like a snotty, like little loser.
Which, to be fair, both Jesper and Kuzco also fit that.
Yeah, so but I was almost wondering, I was like, is this voice actor who I don't think we recognize the voice actor from anything. So I was like, is he like directly drawn inspiration from David Spade and his character voices because he thought it would suit it? Like, it's just really close.
Yeah, Jason Schwartzman is the guy who plays Jesper, and he's done a lot of live action work. Like, he actually really hasn't done a lot of animation. Like, and I haven't seen a lot of the stuff he's in, but he's in Scott Pilgrim versus the World. He's like the final boss.
Gideon. Yeah.
The short grumpy dude.
The guy who has like the chip in the back.
Isn't he short, or am
I mean, he's not tall, but he's not necessarily defined as being short.
Apparently, my brain classified him as the short evil one for some reason.
Fair enough.
I don't remember what he looks like though, but I believe you.
None of the cast in this movie are like, they're all known for live action acting, and I would say they all do an incredible job. Like, J.K. Simmons, my man, one of my favorite actors. He has done a lot of voiceover work, but he's also well known in live action. He does an incredible performance in this movie. Even Norm Macdonald is like kind of that guy you hire because he does like his one note, performance. Even he's pretty good in the role that he has.
And Joan Cusack is Amazing as always. I mean, that's also, she's like David Spade. That's just her voice, and it suits certain characters very well and makes them stand out and just be inherently really funny with her like very like specific like kind of Midwestern Karen vibe, but it was really good.
I was gonna go with condescending matron vibe.
Yeah, that's basically what I said.
Even Rashida Jones as the main female of the movie, Alba. One
Yeah. Was it Alva? I thought it was.
Alva. There we go. Like she's like mostly known from things like The Office and Parks and Rec, kind of just playing like sassy comedic characters. But I don't know. I was like, she's convincing in the role that she has.
Oh yeah, and that was also, yeah, like it obviously it's not super long, so the movie mostly focuses on Jesper and Klaus, but they do have yeah, some of those supporting characters that do have kind of are more than just one note characters, but they have specific things. Like some of the like really side like comic relief characters are very one note, obviously, but like there's like a couple of the supporting characters that like they have personalities and backstories, and you really kind of feel like they feel like real people, and this is a real lived in world that existed before Jesper got there.
Like the one girl who keeps stabbing carrots into snowmen, who has that big character moment at the end of it. I won't spoil it until we get into Spoilerverse, but but there are a lot of like there were a lot of small side characters that really brought the movie to life, and there was a lot of detail in how the transformation wasn't just happening to the main characters. It was something that was really overhauling everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great example of visual storytelling.
Yeah. And as far as like even the more main characters, Alva for sure is like probably the most well developed after the main two characters. And yeah, I think they handled her very well, and her character worked very well, and her progression and decisions made sense for the most part. There's a bit at the end I was like, that's unnecessary, but but for the most part she worked very well, and yeah, they just kind of, it was really nice how they gave care to like a lot of the characters in the story.
Some critics
sorry, I wanted to touch on one last thing before, because I think we're starting to expire things we can talk about without spoilers, but the treatment of like kind of adding in Aboriginal people into it was really, really nice. And as somebody who teaches social study, has to talk about First Nations and Aboriginals a lot, it was really nice to have an inclusion that didn't feel forced in a movie, and that just added to the movie and made it kind of was a great way to add a different culture without it being preachy at all,
and opening up the world more.
Yeah, and the fact that they did not speak English, I thought was a really good decision.
Yeah, good call, Beef Fork Ribs. It's time to dive into the spoilerverse because there are some really spoilery elements of this movie. So, like I said, if you haven't watched the movie yet, now's the time to skip ahead or take a pause and go watch the thing because it's definitely worth your time. There are a couple moments that are either too scary or too dramatic for like little kids. Like I would say anyone younger than 6 or even 7 probably like wouldn't have a hard time watching this. So bear that in mind. But other than that, we're going inside the spoilerverse. Here we are. I think the biggest thing that is like a huge spoiler, and I just wrote it out in my comments, infertility Santa makes me cry.
Oh, wow. Yeah, though that's yeah. So
it just breaks my heart. Like it made me cry when I watched it on the plane, and it made me cry when I watched it last night. And I'm like, even now, I'm like, it's just, oh, it's so sad and it's so poignant.
That for the people listening.
In case you haven't seen the movie, Santa had it, or Klaus had a lady he loved very much, and they really wanted babies, and he like started making toys for them, And then no babies came and they couldn't have babies, and he just kept making toys forever, which is why he has all the toys to give away to the children, and it is very dramatic.
Well, he kept making toys until his wife died, and then he stopped. Yeah.
And then he started making birdhouses. He's a fidgety boy.
I mean, it's, you know, the lore of Santa usually, of course, has Mrs. Claus there alongside, and so to have a version like this where it's like, no, like she's gone, she's long gone, and to like add this like level of like, because I feel like that's a real world thing. A lot of couples struggle. Like I know people who struggle with infertility, and yeah, just giving, I guess, Santa that character trait, or that, I don't know what you want to call it, but giving him that as part of his story, it just, yeah, it just, it does. I don't know. Does it sad for the sake of being sad, or does it feel like real?
It's a really good character choice, I think, especially for Santa, right? It once again, this movie kind of, without being like over explaining, is explaining how Christmas tradition started, right? And the idea that Santa loves children, and that, so I thought it was a really sweet, nice character choice, that it was like part of the reason Santa loves children and goes out of his way to help children, and the reason a lot of the the um the things that happen in the story get set in motion is because he loved kids, and he and his wife always wanted kids, and they weren't able to have them, so he just kind of adopted the children of the world.
And also, the other thing, I guess, to spoilery, you know, dead wife magical wind pushing him to do the right thing.
Yes, it was an interesting, like, hand of God choice.
Yeah, did it bother you that those kind of magical elements were just there without really any explanation?
Nah, I mean, I believe in God, so, like, I believe that there's just random supernatural stuff going on in the world that doesn't really have an explanation. So, like, magic, like wife wind, didn't upset me too much, you know?
The spirit of Christmas, my roommate said.
Yeah, it worked. I would have liked, I mean, maybe this would have been too explainy, but I would have liked the bit at the end where the wind caresses him and he's like, "I'm coming, my love,"
And he
then
oogways away.
yeah, and then he just like does a Jedi thing and disappears into nothingness. I would have liked, because the wind was kind of like swirling with it would like be swirling with like the snow and leaves. I would have liked that to swirl, you know, into like a vague form of her for a minute, and for them to embrace, and then he
Like
just,
in Jack Frost.
yeah, the like
The Michael Keaton Jack Frost.
that kind of thing where it's like, I don't know, just like to see her like actually personified, be like, yes, that was his wife watching out for him, and even though they didn't have kids, her love for him was so strong that she stuck around and helped him find his way again
Oh,
when he lost
I'm
it.
just getting that. Yeah, I wish they had added that in, but even thinking about it now, I'm like, oh man.
Yeah,
Because the only time you see her is a fake out when Jesper's shadow, because he's wearing an apron, looks like a lady, which,
that was a really weird, awkward moment.
yeah.
And I understand why they did it, but it was super jarring. And yeah, like, I mean, here's the thing, I don't know if kids would pick up on that it was his wife. Like, I think for an adult, it was pretty obvious by the end. I mean, especially when he's like, "I'm coming, my love," or whatever, you know, that the wind was his like magic dead wife pushing him in the right direction so he could be happy again. But I would have liked like just one moment at the end where like you got to see her in the wind for a moment.
Definitely. I love Jesper's character arc. Like yes, he goes through a radical transformation from like being like Emperor Kuzco at the start of the movie and being like an actual like good person at the end. But I feel like it's earned. Like you see him put in the hard work to like work his butt off to take on this impossible mission. And I don't know, there's something in me that like likes to see people rise above their limits and just put in the hard grunt work, and then have their hearts changed as a result of that.
For sure. And I mean, it's, people are like that, right? And also there is, the spoiled rich kid is a stereotype for a reason. there's these certain, if you're born under certain circumstances, you're not well equipped to be well socialized or selfless or anything, because you can have whatever you want. Like, suffering exists for a reason, and to teach people how to function, kind of. So it was, yeah, it was really interesting and well done, for sure, to see this character like actually suffering and having to like deal with the world and people, and seeing other people's problems be way bigger than his own, and changing because of it, and learning to be a better person.
I think the only thing, and I do remember when we watched this with your roommates, your one roommate was like, "Oh, don't tell me they're gonna do the liar reveal trick in the third act," and I did think that was a little bit unnecessary. Like, he still could have made the decision to to stay and to face up to his dad at the dock. That's still logical that he would decide that, not right away decide he's staying there, but needed some time to think about it and think about what he's done. But I feel like everybody turning on him because he's leaving, because he had this like goal to leave. Like, yeah, he didn't tell them, but it didn't feel at that moment like there was actually real tension left in him wanting to stay, like, especially after the reveal of how much he changed the town. There was no way like, realistically, there was no way he was going to leave that town just because he could. I
But
feel like even, and his friends should have been able to see that, and it felt really, that part felt a little bit forced for conflict, and they didn't even need it because
Yeah,
there
it was
was
resolved so
conflict.
quickly.
Yeah, and there was already the conflict of the two clans who wanted to keep fighting, who decided that they're going to ruin Christmas. So, like, there was still conflict left in the story. That one was not necessary.
yeah, and that's the thing that I kind of mentioned briefly earlier. Like, the one issue I had with like Alva's character was like, she seemed pretty like realistic and well defined, and her character choices made sense. And then suddenly she's like, "How dare you, you person who came from outside of this town, and then like realized it was a crummy town. How dare you have been planning to leave? That's what you were doing until very recently. It's not a huge betrayal. Like, I feel like until recently, everyone just assumed that everyone else in that town would leave if they could. Like, it wasn't this massive betrayal. It's not like he like told them, "Yes, um I'm I don't know, like, I hate the outside world and I chose to come here." And he clearly didn't like it there at first, just like she didn't.
Yeah, I mean, also at that point, like, you've seen enough to suggest that they're now beginning to be romantically linked to each other, and you would think there'd be a little bit more trust.
Mhm.
I remember you disliking that as well, being like, okay, but did she marry him immediately after these events? Because there hadn't been that much interaction, and clearly she didn't trust him much in
Yeah, it's
that
like, if
point.
you didn't trust that, yeah, I feel for the most part their relationship was pretty well, there was a natural progression and stuff, but yeah, there was just like some bits at the end that were kind of wonky and didn't really seem like they matched up right. And yeah, I just yeah,
'Cause they don't show you their wedding, so for all we know, it did take some time before they actually did get to that point.
but their kids are like of an old enough age at the point where he's like 10, like at this amount of time afterwards. Then suddenly Klaus started like appearing again or whatever, and their kids are a certain age where it's, yeah, I don't know.
Well,
There's
they
like
say they did it for 12 years before Klaus disappeared, so their kids couldn't be older than 10. So we can assume it was they at least waited another year before getting married.
That's true, but other than that, all the character progressions, all the arcs, everything, the way the subtle changes, and also I think one of the things that I really did enjoy was like when they have that big reveal of how much the town has changed. There is this idea that he had been so busy every night going around with Klaus delivering presents and like trying to figure everything else out that he hadn't realized the effect of teaching telling the children to be good, and how that influenced their parents, and how teaching them, getting them into school, like everything that he did for his very selfish reasons at first had actually made the town a better place. And I kind of like that idea that he was just so caught up in the moment that he hadn't noticed that this had become a functional town.
the montage when that shows the neighbors slowly accepting each other and being nicer, like started by the children, and then it slowly like infects the adults and stuff.
Even though they
And
start
it
by
like
being competitive.
Yeah, it starts as like a one-off, like one-upmanship. Like, oh well, I made you a pie. Well, I made you two pies. Like, like. But then eventually it just like, it's kind of that idea of like fake it till you make it almost. It's like it slowly settles into like this new normal of kindness that's really nice and was very well handled and was mostly visual, which was super cool.
Yeah, I mean, I saw one critic's review of this movie saying that the plot was overcomplicated, and I like kind of like raised my eyebrow. I'm like, really? Like, was there too much going on? And then I'm like, well, if I was going to nitpick, the whole kind of rivalry between the two clans of people that they don't really ever explain, like they kind of explain, oh, it's just the tradition that we don't like each other. It would have been nice to have maybe like heard like what the original conflict was actually about, or to even have that element out of the movie altogether. Like you could just say this is a town where people are very sad and don't like each other.
I liked the inherent stupidity of the beef they had with each other. And I think it was kind of a nice thing for kids because there are situations like that. There's obviously like, there's real life, racial relations and things like that go back a long time, like go back really far. And there are people who that like to a obviously less exaggerated extent, but there are families who will have beef with each other for generations. And a lot of the time it starts with one small thing and just it builds and builds, and this resentment and lack of communication builds into something huge and overpowering until it's tradition to be horrible to each other. And that's really horrible and stupid and like a crummy thing that the human race does. So I liked that they were like making a point of showing how pointless the hatred was and how they were literally only hating each other to hate each other.
I think the other thing is, and I remember somebody making this critic of the live action remake of Disney's Beauty and the Beast, where they were like over explaining things, and one of the things that they over explained was why Gaston was the way he was, and I think it was a nostalgia critic who was like, there are small towns completely controlled by one person who's just stronger and more charismatic than everybody else. That happens. It's actually less realistic to have him like have all these reasons for being a terrible person than just say no, he was bigger and stronger than other people, and therefore, like, I understand what you mean. Yes, having maybe a basic conflict that started might be nice, but I don't think it is necessary. And I do think also, kind of echoing what Mjolnir said, that it actually adds to it that even the heads of the family who are the most gung-ho about this don't actually remember why it's happening.
All right, you guys are winning me over to this. I guess I'm trying to appease this critic, be like, okay, how can we make the movie simpler? Because the lie revealed thing, as you pointed out, kind of is pointless because there is this conflict with the families coming to destroy the gifts. So I'm like, well, maybe if we took out the family feud, then the lie revealed thing could get more space to actually matter, and because it's resolved so fast, like he kind of performs one selfless act like immediately, and it's like, okay, all is forgiven.
But the lie revealed is never it's not really set up, and it's not like the family feud more is more integral to the plot and is more explored and is part of what makes the movie kind of funny and interesting and stand out versus the lie revealed. So it makes more sense to be like, we'll cut out that one weird scene about the lie revealed and keep the family conflict instead of cutting out the family conflict, which is like the driving force behind a lot of the movie.
And I think also, like,
and then do a lie revealed, which is super tropey, like lots of movies do that.
And the problem with taking out the family feud or even explaining it is that it is like, yes, you could have it a town where people are generally nasty to each other, but I feel like that would just be the same thing but worse. Why is there an old man on a rocking chair that's been placed on the roof so that he'll rock and fall over, or on an iceberg floating away from the town, or all these things like, oh, it's because these two families hate each other. We kind of talked about the slow transformation of the town, and I really appreciated that, like, the man who looked like he was probably the most terrifying with like the guard dogs and the guns everywhere and all the locks on his room turned out to be one of the first people who started acting like a decent human being, which I thought was cool. And obviously, the little girl who keeps stabbing people, like she keeps stabbing carrots into snowmen, like point in, like she's stabbing them and like dead eye looking straight at the camera. And then later, she does exactly the same thing, but she's actually placing a carrot properly into a snowman.
And she has a creepy like smile instead of a creepy frown or whatever.
Yeah, I loved it. And also, I guess we kind of touched on like where the elves come from, but I guess spoilery thing, like how Santa more or less adopts this entire tribe to help him, but also like they fill out to be his children because he had the little, the
The
little
little alcove.
alcove where he had him and his wife as figurines
Ugh.
with nobody else, and they do
They
fill
were,
it
like,
out and give him
straight
a
up
family.
planning for like 10 kids, and I admire that. Like they made a lot of little like shelves for kids. They were like very prepared.
Yeah, and I think that was really nice, and it was a big part of like the main character actually doing something good. He tried to make a sled, even though he's terrible at it. And it was the first time that Klaus made a new toy, and it was Jesper's selflessness that all plus magic dead wife wind that helped him, and that kind of and I guess we didn't really talk about the whole one what is it one purely selfish act one pure selfless act always begets another.
Yeah, like one good act begets another. That they obviously really focused on, and that was, and once
But
again,
also that
that's
they
a
only
really
say like
nice-
2 or 3 times in the
yeah,
movie.
but they show it a number of times, which is nice. It's like it's a nice message for kids, and it's a good
Yeah,
thing.
show don't tell.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's,
this movie mastered show don't tell.
it was really good. There was a lot of very like nonverbal things that you could understand perfectly well what was going on, and like I personally like when they had the people who couldn't like they spoke a different language, but somehow everything was going along hummingly, and they were all making toys together. Like I personally was like, it's a little unrealistic. How are they communicating? How are they all making the same toys and following his instructions? But like it was cute and wholesome, and it was like a children's cartoon Christmas movie, so I guess I can let that slide.
Also, last thing, I loved the big whale skeleton becoming a Christmas tree.
Yeah, I just really liked the idea of like that. Just it was showing on a small scale that like people like the main character and the town. It's just like the whole point of this is that people change and people can become better, and like doing your best to put good into the world will eventually change the world, which is a really good philosophy that I believe in a lot. And that idea that children are pure and and uncorrupted and these kids were they were gung-ho doing what they were taught, but they were young enough that they were able to change, and their pureness changed the people around them even. And it's that kind of idea where like with stuff like racism and just like stuff like that, it's like, yeah, like kids aren't born racist, right? Like, and these kids weren't born hating like someone because they had red hair. And it was, I don't know, it was really nice. I think it's a really nice message just for anyone to be like, yeah, differences are okay and you can embrace those differences. And even if you were brought up with something that is unfair or whatever, you can change for the better and you can put love into the world. I really liked that.
So coming around to final thoughts, Klaus is a really great B-type Christmas movie. If you're familiar with Santa Claus is Coming to Town from the 70s with Fred Astaire and Mickey Rooney, this is a much better version of that story. It's a great modern telling of how Santa started doing his stuff. It is so heartwarming. It's made me cry every time I've seen it, and I want to give it like a whole 3.5 out of 4 bad cookies.
I'm gonna actually up you on that. Because I do believe, I don't know, I believe in partially judging movies based on what they're trying to accomplish, and I think that in as far as what it's trying to accomplish, I give it a 3.7 out of 5. Sorry, out of 4. like obviously not a perfect movie, and there are animated movie I like better, but as far as like an animated Christmas movie, I think this is probably the best that I've ever witnessed.
I'd agree with that. It was really good. It was super cute and wholesome and had something to say and said it very well and just was a lot fresher than a lot of Christmas movies. And Beef Pork Ribs does not appreciate Christmas movies. I do, and I have plenty of classics that are quite cheesy and silly that I do enjoy. But it was nice to have something like this where it was like you can have that kind of Christmas fun, but then it's also that extra level better.
And I am so triggered that this lost the Academy Award to Toy Story 4, which in my mind is like the worst of all the Toy Stories. And to hear that Klaus, this amazing Christmas movie, lost to Toy Story 4 just boils my bacon.
I saw Toy Story 4 pretty recently, when my family came up for our wedding. And I don't know, they brought it. We watched it. It was okay. Like, it was fine. It was definitely not the best Toy Story movie. And yeah, I would say it did less overall than Klaus. And is like Klaus is definitely a lot prettier. If it was like cuz it won best animated?
Yeah.
Yeah, like Klaus is a better animated movie for sure. Like
It's
the
got better
animation's way
animation, it's got a
better.
better story, it's got a better things that it says, the soundtrack is better, like
It's a unique
the overall feel is better.
but it's like a new story with a unique way of telling it instead of the fourth movie in a series that wrapped up really well after 3. Like Toy Story 4 was better than I expected it to be for sure, but like yeah.
Was unnecessary.
Yeah, for sure.
So Sergio Pablos, if you're listening to this episode from Spain and you understand English, which you probably do because you've worked for Disney,
Gracias.
thank you for this movie. I look forward to whatever your studio comes up with next.
For sure. Yeah, I'll have to keep an eye on that animation studio.
It's just his name, like Sergio Pablo Studios or something, so it's pretty easy to remember. Normally we'd go into the bat jar and look at our mail, but we don't have any this week, so Beef Pork Ribs will remind us how you can get a hold of us.
If you want to reach the show, you can send us an email at
batjarpodcast@gmail.com.
or you can tweet us at
The Bat Cookie Jar.
You can find the Bat Jar Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, because we got a channel. Share our posts on Facebook, write reviews, give our shows a rating. This will help all people join us inside the Bat Jar, and we appreciate it dearly.
And normally this is when we would go inside the bat jar to pull our topic out for next week. But you know what? Like, it's Christmas time. We deserve a bit of a break here. The Bat Jar podcast, surprisingly, like, did not really take any hiatus at all during the lockdown. And since the pandemic's been going on, I don't think we've missed a single week.
Because we cool like that.
Because we what?
Because we cool like that.
Yes.
I need to watch Cool Runnings again. That's a great movie.
Oh, that is a great movie. Yeah, so Beef Pork Ribs, our birthdays are coming up, ignoring Christmas, which is, well, you know, if you're watching these chronologically, like this is before Christmas, the next episode would in theory come out after Christmas. But in the next 2 weeks, we're actually both going to be celebrating our birthdays. And this is a fun piece of trivia. In real life, I'm like 5 days older than Beef Pork Ribs, but my birthday falls towards the end of the year, and Beef Pork Ribs is at the beginning of the year. So while I'm actually only like 5 days older than him, I'm technically a year older than him.
Yes, and the average Joe loves to lord this over me.
It's okay, you're so way older than me.
So we're going to take just 2 weeks off to enjoy Christmas, celebrate our birthdays. We're going to come back swinging in 2021. You know, some people are like, oh, like I can't wait for 2020 to be over, but the pandemic is still going on. So I really don't agree with that sentiment. Yes, like 2020 was not the best year, but if I think about my experience of 2020 and even like doing this podcast, is like Beef Pork Ribs came on as a full-time host. We got to do the Great Memory Lane series, like looking back at the last decade and all the great stuff that had been released. And then sure enough, by the time that was over, COVID had started and everything was being delayed. So we got to have a lot of really interesting conversations. And you know what? Like, I remember we did like our first episode together. We were talking about all the movies coming out in 2020. And I remember saying there's nearly nothing I'm super excited about this year coming out. So the fact that, a lot of the stuff didn't end up coming out in theaters, it really didn't bother me all that much. I did miss going to the movies, but I am certainly hopeful that 2021 will be a better year.
I mean, yeah, I honestly cannot throw shade at 2020. I got married in 2020. I got a new niece in 2020. I kind of actually started my career in 2020. There are so many good things that happened this year for me that I can't really. Yes, obviously, new year, new whatever, but I also haven't done New Year resolutions for at least the last 7 to 10 years, so
It's a good way as any. Mjolnir, since this is the last Bachelor episode of 2020, do you have any final thoughts for the year?
Final thoughts for the year. It sucked, but not as much as it could have. So that's nice.
So beef pork ribs, like our next episode will come out on January 11th, 2021. We could do Wonder Woman 1984. We could have that episode be talking about the second season of The Mandalorian. Or we could just decide in the 2 weeks between now and then to talk about something else.
I think tentatively Mandalorian. I think it's a good way to start off the year, and then perhaps Wonder Woman a little bit later.
Mandalorian is also easy for us to watch.
Yeah, we don't have to make the choice between theater and streaming.
Fair enough. So that's what we'll do then. So everyone who's listening, our next episode will be talking about The Mandalorian. The first 2 seasons are now finished. Come back to the Bachelor podcast in a few weeks to listen to us talk about The Mandalorian. This is the way. And until that time, I'm Average Joe.
I'm Beef Pork Ribs.
I'm Mjolnir.
Catch you on the flip side.
Remember to write or you make Jesper cry.
Toodles!
Oh, and Merry Christmas, everyone.
And a Happy New Year.